"The farm is gone, Maggie." That's all he said. He didn't explain first. He didn't sit her down with context and preparation the way people are advised to deliver difficult news. He just said it standing in the doorway of her hospital room on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with the closing documents already signed and the wire transfer already completed, and the thing already done in the way that Ray Booker did everything that needed doing, completely, before anyone could talk him out of it. Margaret looked at him from the hospital bed. She looked at him for a long time. She understood immediately. Not the details, not the price, not the buyer, not the paperwork, but the shape of it. The reason for it, the particular way Ray was standing in the doorway, which was the way he stood when he had done something large and irreversible and was now simply presenting the fact of it, because discussion was no longer relevant and Ray Booker did not waste either of their time on things that were no longer relevant. "Raymond," she said. "You're going to get well," he said. "That's all I need you to do." Margaret Booker pressed her hands flat on the hospital blanket. She did not cry immediately. She looked at her husband, at the man she had been married to for 31 years. The man who had never once in 31 years said, "I love you" in those specific words, because he had spent 31 years saying it in every other way available to a human being. And she understood that this was the largest of all those ways. And then she cried. And Ray crossed the room and sat beside her and held her hand and did not say anything further, because there was nothing further to say. The farm was gone, and Maggie was going to get well. Iron ground is for people who know what it means to love something enough to let it go. If that's you, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay with us. Raymond Booker was born in 1967 on the same farm. His great-great-grandfather, Elias Booker, had homesteaded in 1891310 acres of western Kentucky bottomland and rolling ridge in Muhlenberg County, the coal and tobacco country between the Green River and the Pond River, where the land runs broad and patient, and the communities have the specific density of places that don't change quickly and remember everything. He was the fourth generation of Booker men to be born on that land. His great-great-grandfather, Elias, had come from Tennessee in 1889 with a mule and a federal land patent application, and the specific ambition of a man who understands that what you build from the ground up belongs to you, in a way that inherited things never quite do. Elias grew tobacco. Western Kentucky's dark-fired tobacco culture ran through Muhlenberg County like the Green River itself, wide, constant, defining. Elias grew it, cured it in the tall, dark-fire barns he built on the ridge, hauled it to the loose-leaf floor in Greenville, and put the proceeds back into the land year after year, with the patient arithmetic of a man building something intended to outlast him. It outlasted him. It outlasted his son Clarence, who farmed it through the Depression years by switching a portion of the acreage to burley tobacco and adding the first cattle, a small Hereford herd, that Clarence purchased in 1938, and that became, over 20 years, the operation's second income stream. Ray's grandfather, Luther, had expanded the cattle operation and reduced the tobacco in the 1960s as market pressures on dark-fired shifted. Ray's father, Doyle Booker, had made the final transition in the late 1980s. All cattle, no tobacco, the old dark-fire barns repurposed as equipment, storage, and hay cover, and had passed the farm to Ray in 2001 when his knees gave out entirely, and the doctor told him that climbing in and out of a tractor cab was no longer a medically supportable activity. Ray had taken it over without ceremony. He had been farming it alongside his father since he was 17. The transition was less a handover than a natural continuation. The farm's operator changed in name, while the farm itself barely noticed. He married Margaret Calloway in 1993. Margaret was a school nurse from Greenville who had the specific, organized competence of someone who spends her days managing the health of other people's children, and who brought that same organized competence to the farm's finances, which had previously been managed by Doyle in a system involving 3 spiral notebooks and a coffee can of receipts. Ray loved her with the complete, inarticulate totality of a man for whom love is not a feeling that requires expression, but a fact that requires action. He demonstrated it in the way he demonstrated everything through what he did, not what he said. He fixed things before she asked. He planted the kitchen garden she liked even though it produced no revenue. He drove 45 minutes to the Owensboro Walmart when she mentioned she wanted a specific kind of tea they didn't carry in Greenville. He never said he loved her. He showed her. Every day of 31 years, in the specific language of a man who believes that actions are more honest than words because actions can't be said carelessly. When the diagnosis came, he showed her in the largest way he had. The Booker farm was 310 acres assembled across 4 generations of Western Kentucky agricultural life, and it had the specific character of land that has been worked thoughtfully for a long time. The bottomland along the lower boundary was dark and rich, the accumulated fertility of river-proximate soil that had been growing tobacco and then grass for 100 years. It ran level and wide along the creek bottom, the kind of field that a farmer enters in spring with a particular anticipation because the ground there does its work without much argument. The ridge ground was lighter, better drained, carrying the mixed fescue and orchard grass pasture that Ray's father Doyle had established in the 1970s and that Ray had maintained and improved since oversowing with better genetics, liming on schedule, rotating grazing with the discipline of a man who understood that grass management was the foundation of a cattle operation's profitability. The farm carried 78 Angus cows and 2 bulls. The calves went to the regional sale barn each fall at weights that consistently ran above the regional average, which is the product not of luck, but of genetics and management, and the specific patient attention of a man who understands that what you put into an animal in its first months is what you sell in the fall. The Darkfire barns, 3 of them, built by Elias Booker in the 1890s and maintained across 4 generations with the alternating care and neglect of structures that are useful and then repurposed and then useful again, still stood on the ridge. They were not used for tobacco. They were used for hay cover, equipment storage, and the particular function of old barns on old farms, which is to stand as physical evidence that the people who built them believed they were building something that would last. They had lasted. They were still standing when the new owner's equipment arrived. Margaret's diagnosis came in August. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. The oncologist at the Owensboro Hospital, a careful, direct man named Dr. Samuels, who delivered the news with the specific honesty of a physician who believes patients deserve accuracy, laid out the treatment options with his characteristic precision. Standard surgery and chemotherapy, covered primarily by their insurance with manageable out-of-pocket costs. Or the clinical trial at Vanderbilt, a targeted immunotherapy protocol that was showing, in its Phase 2 results, significantly better outcomes for stage 3 ovarian cancer than the standard protocol, but that was not yet covered by insurance because it had not yet completed the approval process. The clinical trial cost $340,000 for the full treatment course. Ray sat in Dr. Samuels' office and listened to all of this. He asked one question: which option gave Margaret the better chance? Dr. Samuels said the clinical trial data was early but compelling. He said if it were his wife, in the current state of the evidence, he would choose the trial. Ray nodded. He thanked Dr. Samuels. He drove home. He sat at the kitchen table. He did not pour himself a drink. He did not call anyone. He did not make a list of options or research financing alternatives or explore the landscape of medical crowdfunding or charitable assistance for farm families facing catastrophic health costs. He got out the farm's most recent appraisal completed 2 years earlier for insurance purposes, establishing the farm's value at $387,000, and he called Green River Land Holdings, a regional agricultural investment company whose acquisition mailers had been arriving at the Booker farm address for 3 years, and he told them he was interested in discussing a sale. They were very interested in discussing a sale. The transaction was complete in 6 weeks. $362,000. Ray transferred $340,000 to the Vanderbilt clinical trial payment account. The remaining $22,000 covered closing costs, the first 3 months of the rental house in Greenville, and the specific, miscellaneous costs of dismantling a life assembled over 31 years on 310 acres and compressing it into a 2-bedroom rental with a small yard and a parking space. He told Margaret on a Tuesday afternoon in October, standing in the doorway of her hospital room 4 days after the closing. "The farm is gone, Maggie." Margaret got well. 14 months of treatment surgery at Vanderbilt, 4 chemotherapy cycles, 9 months on the immunotherapy protocol, and at the end of it, in the November of the following year, Dr. Samuels used the word remission with the careful precision of a physician who knows that the word is not a guarantee, but who also knows, in this case, that it is the right word. Margaret was in remission. She came home to the rental house in Greenville. She and Ray sat in the kitchen of the rental house on the evening she came home. With a dinner Ray had cooked, nothing elaborate, the specific food she had been missing during treatment, which was his mother's recipe for beef and vegetable soup that required 3 hours and a particular sequence of additions that Ray had memorized at age 14 and that Margaret had eaten 4 or 5 times a year for 31 years of marriage, and they sat across from each other and ate it. They did not talk about the farm. They had not talked about the farm. Ray had not talked about it because there was nothing to say that would make it less gone, and he was not a man who talked about things that couldn't be changed. Margaret had not talked about it because she understood, with the precision of a woman who had been married to Ray Booker for 31 years, that the subject lived in a place in him that was not available for conversation, and that trying to reach it would only cause him pain without producing comfort. They ate the soup. They were together. The farm was gone. Maggie was well. Ray had told himself every day of the 14 months that this was the correct arithmetic and that he believed it. He did believe it. He also grieved the farm every day in the specific, private way of a man who does not show grief, who carries it internally, in the weight behind ordinary actions. In the fraction of a second, he took every morning before getting out of bed to orient himself to where he was, which was not where he had slept for 55 years. He was still grieving it in December, 6 weeks after Margaret came home, when the phone rang. Here is what I want to ask you before we go any further. I want you to sit with what Ray Booker did. Not the transaction, not the mechanics of the sale, or the wire transfer, or the closing documents. The decision. A man learns that his wife of 31 years has stage 3 cancer. He sits at the kitchen table. He does not research alternatives, or explore crowdfunding, or apply for charitable assistance, or ask anyone for help. He calls the company that has been sending him acquisition mailers for 3 years, and he sells the farm. He sells the farm his great-great-grandfather built in 1891. The farm where his father was born and his grandfather farmed through the Depression, and Elias Booker planted the first tobacco in 1891 with a mule and a patent application, and the ambition of a man building something intended to outlast him. Ray sells it in 6 weeks. He does not tell Margaret until it's done. He does not cry about it. He does not ask for recognition or gratitude or even acknowledgement that what he did was extraordinary. He stands in a hospital doorway on a Tuesday afternoon and says, "The farm is gone, Maggie. You're going to get well." And then he sits beside her and holds her hand. That is the man this story is about. And I think you need to hold the full weight of that before we tell you what happened next. Because what happened next is not the story. What happened next is what happened to a man who already did the only thing that mattered. If this story is already sitting with you, then you already know why you're here. Some of the most important things happen quietly, in hospital doorways, at kitchen tables. Stay with us. There's more ahead. The phone call came from a man named Philip Gaines. Philip Gaines was a title attorney in Owensboro, Kentucky, who represented Green River Land Holdings on their acquisition transactions. He was a competent and methodical attorney who had processed dozens of agricultural land acquisitions for Green River and who called Ray Booker on a Thursday afternoon in December with a tone that was carefully calibrated to be neutral and that communicated, beneath the neutrality, something considerably less than comfortable. "Mr. Booker," Philip Gaines said, "I'm calling regarding the deed from your sale to Green River Land Holdings. Our title team has identified something that requires discussion." Ray was at the kitchen table of the rental house, where he spent most evenings. He had a cup of coffee going cold in front of him, and the farm supply catalog he subscribed to out of habit, even though he no longer had a farm to supply. "What kind of something?" Ray said. Philip Gaines paused in the specific way of an attorney who is about to say something that he knows will have a large effect and who is choosing the order of his words with care. "The deed of sale that transferred the Booker farm to Green River Land Holdings conveys the surface rights, improvements, and appurtenances of the property," Philip Gaines said. "Our title team has determined that the deed does not specifically convey the mineral rights. Under Kentucky property law, mineral rights constitute a separate estate and must be explicitly referenced in the deed language to transfer. The omission in your deed means that the mineral rights remain in your name." Ray listened to this. He set down the coffee cup. "I don't understand what that means practically," Ray said. Philip Gaines took a breath. "Mr. Booker," he said, "Green River Land Holdings conducted exploratory drilling on the property 3 weeks ago. The drilling identified a natural gas formation beneath the surface. A preliminary geological assessment suggests the formation is commercially significant. In order for Green River to execute a mineral lease with a production company, they need either the mineral rights transferred to them or your consent as the mineral rights holder." Ray was quiet. "What is it worth?" Ray said. Philip Gaines was quiet for a moment. "A preliminary assessment by the petroleum geologist Green River retained suggests the recoverable resource value of the formation is between $1.8 million and $3.2 million, depending on formation, depth, and extraction costs," Philip Gaines said. "I want to be transparent with you. Green River is prepared to offer you a settlement for the mineral rights. They would like to resolve this matter." Ray looked at the far wall of the rental kitchen. He thought about Elias Booker, who homesteaded 310 acres of western Kentucky ground in 1891 and grew tobacco and built dark fire barns, and never knew, could not have known what was underneath the ground he was planting. He thought about his father Doyle, who transferred the farm to Ray in 2001 with 2 bad knees and a spiral notebook of receipts, and no idea that the ground under the cattle pasture was sitting on something worth more than the farm itself. He thought about the deed he had signed 6 weeks ago in the office of Green River Land Holdings transaction coordinator, moving quickly, not reading every word with the care it deserved, because reading every word took time, and time was something Margaret didn't have to spare. He thought about Margaret in the next room, asleep already, resting after the last week's treatment fatigue. He thought about $1.8 million. He thought about $3.2 million. He thought about $362,000. "Mr. Gaines," Ray said, "I need to call you back." He hung up the phone. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then he went to the doorway of the bedroom and looked at Margaret sleeping, and stood there for a moment in the particular silence of a man who has just learned something that has rearranged every fact he understood about the last 6 months of his life. He went back to the kitchen. He called a property attorney. Not Philip Gaines. A different one. The attorney's name was Sandra Whitfield, and she practiced property and mineral rights law in Madisonville, Kentucky, and came highly recommended by a man at the county extension office who told Ray that if he had a mineral rights question in western Kentucky he wanted answered correctly, Sandra Whitfield was the answer to his question. Ray called her the following morning and explained everything: the sale, the timeline, the reason for the timeline, the deed language, Philip Gaines's call. Sandra listened without interrupting. When Ray finished, she asked, "Do you have a copy of the deed?" "I have a copy," Ray said. "I'll bring it." He drove to Madisonville. Sandra read the deed in his presence. She read it twice. She looked up. "The mineral rights were never conveyed," she said. The deed language is clear. It transfers surface rights, appurtenances, and improvements. There is no mineral rights conveyance language. Under Kentucky revised statutes, the mineral estate is a separate property interest and must be explicitly addressed in a conveyance instrument to transfer. So they're still mine, Ray said. The mineral rights to the Booker farm are still in your name, Sandra said, legally, completely, and without ambiguity. Ray looked at the deed on Sandra's desk. What does that mean for Green River? He said. It means they cannot execute a commercial mineral lease on the property without either your consent as the mineral rights holder or a conveyance of the mineral estate from you to them. Sandra said, They need you. Ray nodded slowly. And if a petroleum geologist is saying the formation is worth between $1.8 million and $3.2 million, Ray said, then your mineral rights are worth between $1.8 million and $3.2 million, Sandra said. Depending on how you structure the arrangement, outright sale, royalty stream, lease participation, the specific figure would vary, but the asset is substantial. Ray looked at Sandra. Philip Gaines said Green River wants to make a settlement offer for the mineral rights, Ray said. I'm sure they do, Sandra said. And they would prefer to settle quickly and quietly. She paused. Mr. Booker, I want to ask you something before we talk about Green River's likely offer. Go ahead, Ray said. Is there any part of what you want out of this situation that is not about money? Sandra said. Ray looked at the deed. He thought about Elias Booker in 1891. He thought about Doyle handing him the farm in 2001. He thought about the dark fire barns on the ridge. He thought about Margaret's soup. I want the farm back, he said. Sandra looked at him. The surface? She said. All of it, Ray said. Surface and mineral both. I want to buy the surface back from Green River using the mineral rights as leverage. And I want to own the whole thing the way Elias intended when he homesteaded it, except he never owned what was underneath. Sandra was quiet for a moment. That is a more complex negotiation, she said. I know, Ray said. But it's achievable, Sandra said. If the mineral formation is what Green River's geologist says it is, they have strong incentive to negotiate rather than litigate. You hold the mineral estate, they hold the surface. Neither of you can fully exploit the value of the property without the other's cooperation. Then we negotiate, Ray said. Sandra opened a legal pad. Tell me everything about the property, she said. From Elias forward. Ray told her. The negotiation with Green River Land Holdings took 4 months. Philip Gaines represented Green River. Sandra Whitfield represented Ray. The negotiation began with Green River's opening position, a cash settlement of $620,000 for the mineral rights, which would have resolved the title issue cleanly and left Green River free to execute a mineral lease with a production company, and ended after 4 months of careful, methodical work by Sandra and 1 moment of complete clarity by Ray in a place that Green River had not expected to arrive. The moment of clarity came at the second negotiating session in Owensboro, when Green River's principal, a man named Douglas Farr, who ran the company from a well-appointed office and who had the specific confidence of a man accustomed to being the largest financial presence in any room he entered, had made a revised offer of $940,000 for the mineral rights and had prefaced it by saying that he hoped Ray understood this was a generous offer for a retired farmer in his situation. Ray had looked at Douglas Farr. He had been quiet for a moment. Mr. Farr, he said, I don't want to sell you the mineral rights. Douglas Farr had blinked. I want to buy the surface back, Ray said. I want to purchase the farm's surface rights from Green River. At the price Green River paid me $362,000, and I want to retain the mineral rights and enter into a development lease arrangement with a production company of my choosing, with a royalty stream that compensates Green River for the surface disruption associated with any mineral extraction activity. Douglas Farr had looked at Philip Gaines. Philip Gaines had looked at his legal pad. Sandra Whitfield had said nothing, because she had discussed this position with Ray in detail and had told him to let it land in the room and give it time to be understood. It took 3 weeks to be understood. Green River's analysis of the position concluded that Ray's proposal, while structurally unconventional, was financially sound from Green River's perspective. They would recover their acquisition cost of $362,000 through the surface rights buyback, retain royalty compensation for surface disruption, and have the mineral development proceed under a structure that eliminated the title dispute and allowed commercial extraction to begin. The alternative litigation over the mineral estate, which Sandra had indicated was Green River's only other option, would delay commercial development by years and produce legal costs that diminished whatever outcome was ultimately achieved. Green River accepted. The surface rights to the Booker farm were transferred back to Ray Booker for $362,000, the same price Green River had paid, funded by a mineral development advance payment from Appalachian Natural Resources, the production company Sandra had identified and approached while the Green River negotiation was ongoing, which paid Ray $410,000 against future royalties for the right to begin extraction development on the mineral estate. Ray used $362,000 to buy the farm back. He kept $48,000 as operating capital. The royalty stream projected over the life of the formation at between $180,000 and $280,000 annually began flowing 12 months after the development lease was executed. Ray told Margaret on a Saturday morning in March. He sat across from her at the kitchen table of the rental house, the same table where he had received Philip Gaines's phone call, where he had sat in the evenings with the farm supply catalog and the going cold coffee and the quiet grief of a man who had made the right choice and could not make peace with its cost. He put the deed on the table. The new deed. The one with his name on it. The one that read, Raymond James Booker, surface and mineral rights, 310 acres, Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. Margaret looked at the deed. She looked at her husband. She understood it immediately, not the legal specifics, not the mineral rights mechanism, not the 4 months of negotiation, but the shape of it, the outcome, the fact. The farm was back. Raymond, she said. He looked at her. How, she said. He told her. He told her all of it, Philip Gaines's call, Sandra Whitfield, the negotiation, Douglas Farr, Appalachian Natural Resources, the royalty stream. He told it the way he told things, which was plainly and in sequence and without editorializing. Margaret listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. She looked at the deed on the table. Elias didn't own the mineral rights, she said. No, Ray said. Nobody did. They were retained by the original land patent holder when Elias filed in 1891. That's how it worked then. The surface transferred, but the mineral estate stayed in the federal government until it was released in 1934. It passed through the county record into the deed chain, but nobody ever paid attention to it because nobody had reason to. And Green River's transaction coordinator didn't include it in the deed, Margaret said. Didn't include it, Ray said. Probably didn't know to look. Margaret looked at the deed. So we own all of it now, she said. Surface and mineral both, Ray said. First time any Booker has owned the whole thing. Margaret put her hand on the deed. She looked at her husband. You sold it to save me, she said. Yes, Ray said. And it came back, she said. I know. Ray looked at his wife, at Margaret, who was in remission, who was sitting at a kitchen table in a rental house in Greenville, and who was going to be sitting at a kitchen table on the farm in the spring. The farm that was theirs again, surface and mineral, all of it, and he felt something move in him that he didn't have a word for, which was appropriate because he was not a man who used words for the things that mattered most. It came back, he said. Ray and Margaret moved back to the Booker farm in April. The farmhouse, which Green River had not modified or demolished, having acquired it as an investment asset and managed it with the efficient indifference of a company that buys farms as financial instruments, was as Ray had left it. The kitchen was the same. The bedroom where Ray had slept for 55 years was the same. The dark fire barns on the ridge were standing, unchanged, the way old barns stand when they've been built by men who believed in building things to last. Ray restocked the cattle and made 40 Angus cows to start, which was below the farm's carrying capacity but consistent with what he could manage with the careful, deliberate rebuild of a man who is not in a hurry because he has already learned what hurrying costs. The royalty checks from Appalachian Natural Resources began arriving in July. Ray set up a separate account for them. He paid off the farm's operating costs from the cattle operation, the way he always had. The royalty income went elsewhere. Some of it went into a college fund for their daughter's 2 children. Some of it went to the Muhlenberg County Farm Bureau's Emergency Assistance Fund, which provided short-term financial support to farm families facing medical crises. Ray established the contribution anonymously. He did not explain it to Margaret at first. She found out 6 months later when the Farm Bureau's executive director sent a thank you letter to the farm address, and Margaret opened it because she opened all the mail. She brought the letter to Ray in the barn where he was doing the afternoon feeding. She held it up. He looked at it. "There are families in this county who can't pay for treatment," he said, "and they don't know what they're signing when they're moving fast." Margaret looked at her husband. She folded the letter. She put it in her pocket. She went back to the house. She said nothing further about it, because there was nothing further to say. Ray had said it the only way he knew how, which was by doing it. If this is your first time here, welcome to Iron Ground. We tell the stories that remind you what love actually looks like, not in words, in what people do. Subscribe and stay with us. There's always more ahead. Raymond Booker is 59 now. He farms 310 acres in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky surface and mineral both. The first Booker to own the complete estate since Elias homesteaded the surface in 1891, with a mule and a federal land patent and no knowledge of what was underneath. Margaret is in her 3rd year of remission. She works 3 mornings a week as a volunteer at the Owensboro Regional Medical Center on the oncology floor, sitting with patients who are beginning treatment and who have questions that the medical staff answer clinically and that Margaret answers from a different kind of knowledge. She brings them soup sometimes. Her own recipe. Ray tends the cattle. He tends the dark fire barns on the ridge, not because he uses them for anything specific, but because they are Elias Booker's barns and they are standing and they will continue standing as long as a Booker is on the land to see that they do. He walks the farm's boundary fence once a month to the way his father walked it and his grandfather before that, not because the fencing needs that much attention, but because walking it is the way he marks the fact of being here, on this ground, in possession of it. He found a copy of the original 1,891 federal land patent in the Muhlenberg County deed records, which Sandra Whitfield helped him locate after the transaction was complete. He had it framed. It hangs in the kitchen, above the table where Ray sits in the evenings with his coffee and the farm supply catalog. Elias Booker's name is on it. Beneath it, in Ray's handwriting on a piece of paper, he taped to the frame's inner edge, where only he can see it when he takes the frame off the wall, which he does occasionally. He didn't know what was underneath, neither did I. But we're still here. I want to tell you what this story is about. Not the mineral rights, not the deed language or the negotiation or the royalty stream or the way Sandra Whitfield structured the buyback. Those are the mechanism. The story is about a man who stood in a hospital doorway and said, "The farm is gone, Maggie." And who meant, "You are worth more than any acre of ground on earth." And who was right. And who lost the farm and grieved it silently, the way men like Ray grieve things, which is without showing and without stopping and without any expectation of relief. And who received relief anyway. Not because he deserved it more than other people who make sacrifices and receive nothing back. Not because the universe maintains a ledger of generous acts and issues corresponding rewards, but because a transaction coordinator made a drafting error, because Elias Booker homesteaded surface in 1891 on ground that was sitting on something neither he nor any of his descendants had ever known was there. Because Philip Gaines made a phone call that he probably hoped would result in a quiet settlement, and instead resulted in a woman named Sandra Whitfield reading a deed and a man named Ray Booker saying, in the quiet, precise way he said everything that mattered, I want the farm back. All of it. Surface and mineral both. The way Elias intended. Except Elias never got there. Ray did. And the dark fire barns are still on the ridge. And Margaret's soup is on the stove. And the farm is there in the morning when Ray walks out to feed the cattle, the same farm, the same ground, the same blue ridge on the same sky, the same western Kentucky horizon, the same land that Elias Booker planted in 1891 and that Ray Booker stood on in the October of the worst year of his life and signed away without hesitation because Maggie needed it and she was worth it. And she was worth it. And the farm came back. And Ray was right about the arithmetic all along. He just didn't know yet how right.